look and see.
I'm not sure.
Okay. Drew, what do you remember? How far did we get? Did we just read the textbook?
So I don't think I was there when you
Okay.
read the textbook. So
Oh,
I
that's right.
don't know. So I have up through 15. That's what I have of the chapter 14 exercises. So
Okay. So we will, we read the textbook the last time we were together. I do remember that. And I think we assigned the first page of the exercises, which we can do tonight. We'll see how far beyond that we can get tonight.
sounds good.
And I'm assuming that you got the handout with my work on these exercises. If you didn't,
I now have the workbook, so I have the original. So
Page 14.
That's-
I'll make sure this gets
Okay.
posted. I tried to give Dad a copy, and I think they may have misplaced it.
okay,
I wasn't sure if they'd found it again. So
all right. Well,
thank you all.
open your books then to the paradigm on page 139, so we can have that handy. But as you probably realize, this is very similar to the article. The only difference, well, not the only, but the main difference is that the relative pronouns will always have a rough breathing and an accent. And the neuter gender in the singular, nominative and masculine, nominative and accusative, has the alternate form. Not the Omicron nu, but just the Omicron. And otherwise, I think well, there is another difference too. In the nominative singular masculine, you've got a sigma there, whereas in the article, you only have the Omicron. So that's the only differences I can think about, but always you'll have the rough breathing plus the accent. Okay. So for the parsing, we'll take this slowly, and I'll do a few of them, and then if you want, you can try your hand at one or two.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds good.
First one is simply the alpha with a rough breathing and an accent, which means it is a relative pronoun. It could either be nominative or accusative, plural, neuter. That's probably you're getting familiar enough with the nominative plural to notice that it's always got that alpha there. That's that's in every neuter word, as far as I know, without exceptions. I'm talking about with nouns, the ending would be the alpha.
Right.
But with the article,
If it's neuter plural.
yeah, neuter plural.
Right.
So that's the lexical form is has, he, ho. And the inflected meaning is either which or that. Of course, it's plural, so excuse me, I should which or yeah, that, which or that. Now, another thing I ought to remind us of is something he's got written down 2 or 3 places, but 1414, the last sentence here, relative clauses are always dependent. They will never contain the main subject and verb of the sentence. So he has recommended that we put slash marks around the entire dependent clause, relative clause, which is a dependent clause. So as we get into the exercises, let's do that. So we know the limits of the relative clause. And I think it is almost always the case that the relative pronoun is the first word of that relative clause. I can't think of an example where it would not be. But as we get in the exercises, we'll check that out. Okay, the next one, number 2, is an omega with a rough breathing and a circumflex, but also the iota subscript. And you remember the iota subscripts in the singular for the first and second declension. And since the relative pronoun follows the 2-1-2 pattern, there's no third declension involved. So this is going to be dative singular. Well, it could be masculine or it could be neuter because they have the same form. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Also, the lexical
Yeah.
form is the same. And we'll use a keyword for the dative. Either to or for, could be in or with, or sometimes by, but to or for, whom or which.
Right. Okay.
All right.
Good so far.
Next one doesn't have an accent, so it can't be a relative pronoun. So it's the article, nominative singular feminine of the article. Ha, he, ta is the lexical form. And the inflected meaning is the woman or the feminine thing like church, or sometimes you can translate it as she.
Okay.
Remember how the article is sometimes understood to be like a personal pronoun. So if you have that kind of situation, you would translate it she.
Mm-hmm.
Next one, ekenus. Looks like a demonstrative pronoun to me. Accusative plural. See the us ending? That's accusative plural masculine.
Right.
And it can't be anything else. It can't be neuter.
That one always trips me up just for a moment to think
Does
that
it?
that could be genitive because I see the oo and then
Oh,
the
yeah.
s, and I'm like, all right, that's the masculine plural
That's right.
nominative.
Mhm.
Yeah.
From ekenos,
Mhm.
and its meaning is those men
Or masculine.
or those words. For instance, if logos is the noun.
Right.
Rhyming
Was very easy in Greek.
What was?
Rhyming was very easy. In Greek.
Yeah, because of the
There's-
endings that match.
There's a reason that a lot of classical poetry is in rhyming couplets. It was very easy to do. It's actually hard to do rhyming poetry in English without having it sound contrived.
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
lot of inflected languages have rhyming poetry as some of the larger poems that they produced.
Now, I know poetry in Hebrew is not necessarily rhyming. It's they use other forms for it to consider. For instance, couplets that have similar meanings or opposite meanings.
Right.
But Drew, do you happen to know from other languages when rhyming became a mode of poetry?
Well, as far as I know, in Greek, as far back as we have Greek poetry. It is rhyming poetry. Homer was rhyming poetry. And some of I think there's earlier things. A lot of the plays, I think, are rhyming as well.
Yeah.
And of course, I only really study European languages so far. And So a lot of those are also rhyming. Interestingly, Germanic languages, at least in some of the earlier poems that we have from them, are not rhyming, but alliterate. The first letters, they emphasize having similar sounds.
Oh,
In fact, we have some evidence that certain Germanic cultures thought rhyming poetry was this an inferior way of writing poetry, and it was all about alliteration, which is funny because now um, it's interesting in modern English, being able to do a rhyme that doesn't sound contrived, we
yeah.
actually consider that a fairly reasonable mark of an interesting meter. Alliteration feels kind of contrived now.
Hmm.
But yeah, so as far as I know, some of the earliest Greek stuff is rhyming. I know nothing about Hebrew language or poetry. So
Well, I've read that about the Psalms
Yeah.
mhm,
and the Proverbs too.
Hmm.
Uh, this may or may not connect with what we just said, but I happen to remember in the book of Hebrews, Hebrews was written by an author. Some people think it's Paul, but most people consider it just anonymous. But it's very, very good Greek. It's almost like classical Greek. But the first verse, I'll read it in English. God, who at various times and in various ways spoke in times past to the fathers by the prophets, has in these last days spoken unto us by his Son. That's to give you an idea of what it's saying. But in the Greek, the first three words, palumeros kai palutropos kalai hatheos. Those two words, palumeros, means in many ways, and palutropos means in various ways. And that's kind of a alliterative sound.
That's fat because it's also they both alliterate and rhyme.
Hey, that's because the os ending is there, but those are both adverbs in many ways and in various ways. So
Fascinating.
yeah, he spoke through the prophets. He spoke through creation. He spoke sometimes audibly. That's many ways. Well, many in various ways. But in these last days, he's spoken to us in his Son. And that's another interesting thing. I remember reading something about that. The word his is not there, or it's not the son of him. It's not to out to you out to. It's just and you. No, and we dative singular. Which somebody pointed out, the lack of the article there gives special emphasis to the quality, or how did he put it? Well, I'm not going to be able to say it the way I want to. I'll have to bring that and show it to you some other way. But anyway, rhyming, that's an interesting subject. Okay. Number 5, somebody feel brave enough to try that one?
I'll have a go at it.
Right.
So this is, I think it's a relative pronoun.
Yes, it is.
It should be the feminine accusative and plural form
That's
of that
right.
pronoun,
Mhm.
which would be probably whom,
That's right.
if it's right, the article of, or the object of a verb. It's probably what the accusative is doing, but, and then it'd be hos, hey, ho for
Mhm.
the lexical forms.
Okay, a phrase to use that in, the
Hmm.
women whom we saw.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next, number 6 is hutoi. This looks a little like a relative pronoun because it has accent and rough reading. However, it's not a relative pronoun because it's a different word. Somebody want to try that one?
Sure. So I remember what I was thinking here. Okay, so hutoi
Mhm.
is the near demonstrative,
Mhm.
and it is the nominative plural masculine declination of it.
Right.
So the inflected meaning would be these masculine
Yeah.
things.
These masculine things or people.
Right.
Okay. Haste. I'll do that one. That is a relative pronoun. It's a genitive singular feminine of has, he, ha, and keyword of whom or of which. Singular thing. Next one, hone, is a relative pronoun.
Mhm.
It's we should be familiar with the omega nu being genitive plural.
Right.
Of
Of anything.
anything, yeah. Of masculine, feminine, or neuter. Lexical form, has, he, ho, of whom or of which. But here it's of whom or of which masculine plural things. Next word, foti. Who wants that?
I could try it.
All right.
I believe it's it would be the lex. So it's dative,
Yeah.
singular, nominative. Oh, sorry, neuter. Sorry,
That's
dative,
right.
singular, neuter.
Mhm.
The lexical form is phos. Sorry, phos, of which the genitive is photos, and the article ta
Right.
for the nominative case. And the inflected meaning would be something like to the light, to light.
Yeah. To a light, unless you have the article.
Right.
Last one, Hain. Drew, you want to try that one?
Sure. This should also be a form of the relative pronoun.
Right.
And it should be the feminine accusative singular form. So that
Okay.
would be whom again.
Right.
Yeah.
That's it. Good.
I did have
Let's
just a
try the
question.
warm-up.
A question out of
Okay.
curiosity. So is there a reason why the on sound is the ending we added to make the noun photon for modern scientific discussion? Is that just a convention that we made up more recently? Because that would be the because photon should be neuter, right? So would that be
Yeah,
so that's just the new nominative form, right?
I believe so. Nominative or accusative.
Okay. So it's just the
Well, I hadn't thought of that, but photon, yeah, that's a particle of light.
Right.
Currently, it's a relatively new concept that light is particular, not necessarily just waves.
So it's just the noun for light, right? In
Yeah,
Greek. That's
yeah, I
interesting.
think that's, yeah.
All right.
Okay. Number alpha in the warm-up. Ta semea ha epoye. Well, the relative pronoun is ha. And you can put slash marks around the whole relative clause. Ha
Which is the whole
poye.
thing, right?
Yeah. Now, this is just a sentence fragment, so it's not going to make a lot of sense. But ta semea is the signs
Mhm.
which, and then he was doing.
And that would be equally acceptable in the
Yes,
English sense.
that or which.
Okay.
Mhm. And the word that is used for so many things, a demonstrative pronoun
Right.
or a relative pronoun, or there's other things too, and I can't think of the terminology that it's used, but
It's something that can
Yeah.
be used in so many ways.
somebody came up with a ridiculous sentence that had that used 5 different ways. Okay, number beta, let's read together.
Mhm.
He epangelia, hein autas
Autos.
epangelato.
Haman.
Wow.
Missed the last word there.
Oh,
Hamin.
Hamin, yeah, I did miss it. Okay, epangelia is a promise, that's a noun.
Mhm.
And then epangel,
And that is the nominative form. Right?
yes,
'Cause
the article is
article
nominative
helps, right?
singular feminine.
Right.
So,
Yeah, but-
but the other word, epangelate,
yeah.
epangelato, gosh, I'm having trouble with that. That's a verb. They're related, of course, the
Mhm.
verb and the noun form. So the promise, now, hein is our relative pronoun, so that
Yes.
put a slash mark in front of that. And I think all the rest of the sentence is part of the relative clause,
So,
which,
right. I'm sorry. Keep going.
okay, which, autos, nominative singular masculine, I'm going to call that a personal pronoun. He, but in addition to that, the he is in the verb, included in the verb. So, which he himself, if you want to emphasize the pronoun, promised to you. So the promise which he promised, excuse me, not you, us.
Mhm. So just to make sure I'm thinking about this correctly with this relative pronoun,
All right.
it is feminine
Yes.
and plural. Oh, is it? No,
No,
sorry, singular.
yeah.
Singular. My bad. Sorry. Feminine and singular because of epengalia. The previous word is feminine and singular,
Well, yes,
but
but
it is nominative because it is the object of the relative clause
Mhm.
that it starts.
it's not
Mhm.
nominative.
I'm
it's
sorry,
accusative.
accusative. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I meant to say accusative.
Right.
It's
The case of the
Right.
relative is determined by the function in its clause.
right, but its gender and number are determined by its antecedent,
Exactly.
which is promise,
That's right.
and then its
So-
case may, unless it's a case of attraction,
Yeah.
its case is being determined by the fact that it is the object. So what he has promised to us are the promises.
Mhm.
So it's
You got it
which-
exactly.
okay.
Drew,
And
It took me a minute to get that right because I kept thinking adjectivally, it's like everything comes from the antecedent.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I was like, why is it accusative? I don't understand. So anyway, I finally got there.
okay,
and the
Drew,
fact
what'd you-
that the promise is nominative would suggest that in the rest of this fragment, it's the subject of the verb of the bigger sentence, which we
That's
don't have
right.
here.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Right.
okay. You could add to that to make it a full sentence and say the promise which he promised to us was written in the book.
Right. Right. That would make it a complete
Yeah.
sentence, right?
Okay,
Okay.
let's read the next one. Hos
Hos
kata
kata
skeuase
skeuase
tain
tain
hadon
hadon
su. Now, look at, before we translate it, look at that tain hadon. Does that look odd to you?
It definitely does.
Okay,
Um,
this is one of those peculiar nouns that follows the
right. The
the
eta and
second
the,
declension,
yeah.
but it's a feminine noun.
Mhm.
The
Right.
meaning of it is way, the way.
Mhm.
Uh,
So it's
so
second.
hey hados is the lexical form.
It's feminine second declension.
That's right.
which means that here it's accusative and singular, right?
That's right. Mhm.
Okay.
Okay. Our relative pronoun is what?
Hos.
That's right.
Yeah.
So you can put a slash in front of Haas and where would you put the ending slash?
At the end.
Yeah,
the
I
whole
think so. It's all,
Mhm,
the whole thing is a relative clause.
Right.
mhm.
Yeah, there is no main verb because it's not a whole sentence.
Right. But if like Haas was say just ha instead,
Yeah,
then and we had some noun there.
well, you could simply just replace the relative with the article and you'd have a complete sentence.
Right.
He will prepare your way.
Right. Autos.
Yeah.
Yeah, will prepare the way.
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
autos, that's good.
Mhm.
Good thinking.
So it is a sentence in a sentence, but
Mhm.
it's set off as being dependent by the relative.
That's right.
Okay.
Okay. Number delta. Have we finished that adequately?
I think so. He will. Yeah, I
Who?
had now. I wasn't sure. Right? Who? Well, who will prepare the way? Your way,
Yeah.
or the way of you.
Right.
And
you singular.
Right. I was just curious if, I mean, it's a fragment, so we don't really. It's
Mhm.
harder to judge exactly what word we should use, I guess, for Haas. But I was wondering if it's something like "he who will prepare."
Yes. It
Your
would,
way.
it is not, excuse me, it is masculine, singular.
Right.
So,
And there's a later. Actually, once we get down to epsilon, we can talk about it because there's
Okay.
another case where I mean, the actual translations I think do that.
I think this is talking about John the Baptist,
Oh, okay.
who will prepare your way. Remember, he was the forerunner of Christ,
Mm-hmm.
and it's quoting from Isaiah, I think.
Oh, okay.
The messenger who will prepare the way before you.
Got it.
Okay. The first word there. Somebody want to try to pronounce that?
I'm sorry, we're on delta now.
Delta,
correct?
yeah.
Okay. Sure. Hen.
Right. Is that a preposition?
Oh, I thought it was, but
If
wait a
it-
minute. Hen wouldn't. What is it?
Right.
Oh,
So what is that
darn
word?
it. It got me. I missed the breathing. I'm not sure because that's not the relative pronoun either.
Remember that word,
Bummer.
recent word that we had in the vocabulary?
Yeah.
Pace me a hen.
Right.
What is,
Okay.
you know the meaning of it
I
now?
forgot off the top of my head.
It means one.
Right. Okay.
Okay, so
Hen.
hen, that's the neuter form of it.
Gotta watch out for that. Okay.
So it's nominative singular neuter. I forgot to write that down. Okay, hen, tone, ployon,
Ployon.
ha,
Ha.
hain,
Simonos.
simonos.
So
Where's our relative pronoun then?
ha.
Right. Okay, so let's put a slash mark in front of that and after simonos. So somebody wants to take a stab at that sentence or fragment? I'll do it. One of the boats.
Plural genitive
Yeah,
of, okay.
of one of the boats, which was Simon's,
Yeah, okay.
or of Simon.
That's interesting. I don't usually think, if I were to say one of, I don't think of it as a genitive sort of thing normally.
You put the
And
of
that
with
was
the
tricky.
previous word.
Yeah, I think one of is almost
Yeah.
a unit. So I'd
Yeah.
say like one of us,
Yeah.
not one of us. You know, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
So
But
having that
that's-
as a supplied word was tripping me up there. One of the boats.
You could think of it maybe as one from the boats, or
Right.
one out of the boats,
Yep.
one out of the group of boats.
Right. Right. Okay. That's
Okay.
interesting. Cool.
Number epsilon, Haas,
Gar,
Gar, Ook,
Ook,
Esten,
Esten,
Kaf,
Kaf,
Hamon,
Hamon,
Hooper,
Hooper,
Hamon,
Hamon,
Esten.
Esten.
Yeah, that's an interesting sentence. Where's the relative pronoun?
Haas.
Right. Put a slash in front of that. And where's the end of the relative clause?
The comma, I think.
Yeah.
The comma after Hamon.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I think you're right. So
And
let's translate just the relative clause now. Somebody want to try?
sure. So putting Gar first.
Yeah.
For who not is against us. And because Kath there, or kata,
Yeah.
with the genitive.
Is against.
Right.
Mhm.
So for who is not against us.
Yeah.
And I supplied he there, but that's my Bible translation talking.
Yeah, I think you can do that. Let me point out something. I missed this when we were reading through the text. Bottom of page 139, footnote 3. Some scholars think of there being an unexpressed word that is the antecedent to the relative pronoun. This unexpressed word is the actual subject, direct object, etc. So if you add the word he, and he does that in some of his explanation
What is
here.
that footnoting? Sorry, I'm trying to.
Well,
part of
the word he then is the unexpressed word, which you add to make it make sense in English. So for he who is not against us. So the he that you supply, being the unexpressed word, is the subject. of
Right.
that.
Okay. Because the whole relative clause itself can act as you said, subject, direct
Mhm.
object, preposition. So
That's
like
right.
just like a noun.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Or I did it differently. I said for whoever, I added ever,
Mm.
whoever, making it I can't think of the term yet. Indefinite relative pronoun. But for he who is not against us is a good way to do it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the main sentence with its verb.
So our glyph included on behalf of, which is not
Yeah.
what would appear in the translation here, I don't think,
Yeah.
but that was the closest of the translations
Yeah. On
given to us.
behalf of, or simply for.
Right. Makes more sense. But yeah, for us is.
Yeah.
So is for
For
us.
us. Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Good. You happy with that, Drew?
I think that
Okay.
looks good.
Number Zeta, footnote 1. There's no verb in this warm-up. It is made up of a phrase and a clause.
Yeah, I want to bring that up in a bit, I think.
You want to talk about it?
Yeah. So So I think we have our relative clause is from ha.
Excuse me a second, Drew.
Oh.
There's a note on your screen that says low battery. Is that going to cause a problem?
It may. Yeah. Sorry, continue. I'll address it.
Okay. So ha is our relative pronoun,
Right.
No, I didn't.
and the clause should be from ha to autu at the end, right?
Should we get over closer to there?
I'm trying to think about the easiest way to do this.
We could move.
I actually could set it up right. I mean, would it be disruptive if it sat that well? Let me just go check the storage closet real quick.
Okay.
Oh,
I'll plug it in on my end, Zach. Does that help?
Yeah, that works. That'll do
We'll
it.
take a short break here.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
All good.
So are you, ever since you've had that seminar or thing that you went to, are you working on things related to that?
Yeah. So well, I'm in the process of finishing out my dissertation.
Yes.
So I'm about I could probably get it defended this fall. October probably is the guess. So just touching up the last bits of the last chapter, essentially.
Mhm.
So and then I'll have that. And in the meantime, while I'm doing that, I'm also looking for gainful employment. So
Well, good for you.
yeah. So
What kind of employment are you interested in?
well, so far, I have applications out mainly in the tech writing field. So that's people who generate instruction manuals, basically translate from what the engineers are doing into non-expert speak. Sometimes that's for customers like an instruction manual. Sometimes that's just for internal documentation, just so that the company knows what's going on. So I've applied for that. I have the original plan in getting the doctorate was to get into teaching, which was a small and difficult field when I got into the degree. And I think some of the fallout from COVID has turned that field from a difficult one to a foolish one to get into.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Just because a lot of universities in the US are not really interested in maintaining the same level of specialization in history and literature that they used to. So a lot of professors are retiring and the universities are just not replacing them. A lot of teaching, the heavy workload of teaching is being done as exclusively part-time positions rather than fewer full-time people. At least at all the universities I'm familiar with, which makes it sort of not really a viable career option anymore. So I'm getting into tech writing and possibly some other stuff that I hadn't heard of before, but apparently they're looking for people with my skill set to do. I don't know if you know anything about the AI systems that are coming online these days.
Artificial information?
Intelligence. Yeah.
Intelligence, yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard the term and,
it doesn't really mean that. It's more like a really sophisticated, at least the ones I have now, are more like really sophisticated autocorrects on your text messaging. It's a lot more complicated than that, but it really boils down to you can ask it to write you a little essay, and it will write you a little essay that sounds pretty good. It sounds pretty human, but it's just basically picking best fit words from what you asked it. So what does it think sounds good? Which means it doesn't look up anything. It just makes stuff up. But there are people who are interested in using this to, say, put out search engine optimized websites, doing sort of filler work, things like that, or seeing how they can continue to push these things to do what they want them to do instead of doing what they presently do. So there are certain fields that it sounds like I have been told by other people that they're looking for these people and I might be a good fit for them. So I've also been looking into that.
It sounds like cutting edge technology to me.
It might be, which might mean that it's a job that will exist for the next 2 years and then go away. But I'd be happy to do it for 2 years if someone wants to pay me to do it. So
Well, this, I've lived long enough to remember times when things were not made to become obsolete in a short time. I mean, there used to be a different philosophy. Now it's planned obsolescence.
Right. I think from what I understand, this is more like at the very beginning, at the first advent of automobiles. You might have had people who were paid to drive, not necessarily because people just didn't, like the luxury of being driven around, but because they were, for their day, rather complex bits of machinery that required specialized understanding, maintenance, and handling, right?
Mhm.
But then as cars got better, that became a thing most people knew how to do, right? And so that occupation mostly went away, and then morphed into sort of a luxury statement of wealth or convenience, or certain occupations might require a driver, but it was no longer a thing that required a specialized subset of people. And this might be the same sort of thing.
Yeah. All right.
So-
Well, let's get back to Greek now.
All right. So
Number zeta is where we were. You had a question about it, Drew?
yeah, so the translation I came up with was something like, from the 7 spirits, which is before we get to the relative clause.
Yeah, that's the prepositional phrase.
Yep. Which, and then literally before his throne. And I really wanted to add an implied being verb in there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Which are before the throne.
Yeah.
Which
Or were.
I need a being verb in there. And I know Mounts said in his note that there was no verb in either of these. And I know there technically isn't, but is he saying that we shouldn't feel the need to add one? I wasn't sure.
No, he's not saying that.
Okay.
In fact, it's a very common thing in Greek to have verbless sentences. In fact, I wish I had brought it tonight, but I made a buried Greek treasure on 2 Timothy 3:16, which we were talking about in our class Bible study last Tuesday. All scripture is given by inspiration of God and is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness. There is no verb is in that sentence. It's supplied in the better study Bibles. You'll have it in italics. But that lack of the verb there caused some translators to translate it. Well, for instance, the Revised Standard Version, which came out in the early 1940s, was a favorite of the liberal theologians because they did not want that scripture to say, that verse to say all scripture is inspired. Actually, literally, God breathed. Theopneustos is the word. So they changed the order of words to make it say all scripture that is inspired by God is profitable for such and such. So they made it a relative.
Quite a few words there now.
Yeah,
right.
They made it a relative clause. All scripture that is inspired, and that was not a bona fide option of translation. The place that you put the supplied verb is equating verb is the natural place to put it. And I'm not going to be able to say it the way I wrote it down, but the translations that we have and that we rely on correctly put the is where it does. And so but it's done very commonly. And what I read in a certain place said that it makes sense to put it there because that's what the audience wouldn't be expecting it to say.
Okay.
In other words, the RSV translation had to force it to be where it is. It's not a natural reading of it. So yeah, that's a good translation, Drew.
Okay.
So the last one, theos, tes erenes, has, there's our relative pronoun, estai, meth, humon. Now, estai is a form of the verb ami. It's the future. He, she, or it will be.
Okay.
Has Mounts given us that anywhere? I couldn't
Well,
find
I
that.
put a note
I
here.
couldn't.
Page 359.
359.
Let me see if I got it right.
It was about the subjunctive.
Yeah, that's, I don't know where I got that. Page 359. I wrote it down, but I can't remember now where. Maybe it's, well, we've got in the appendix of the textbook, they do on page 435, they've got a paradigm of AME, full paradigm, I believe, page 435. There it is. Do you see it? The third column on the top of the page, SMI, SA, STI. That's he, she, or it is, or will be.
Will be. Okay.
Got it. Okay. Yes. Okay.
Okay. I don't know why he didn't give us the meaning of that word. He usually does. But anyway, I'll translate that one.
Okay.
Hatheos tes erenes, the God of peace, who will be with you.
Would it be reasonable to put all of you, since it is plural?
It is plural, but usually usually there would be the word all there.
Anta of some kind. Okay.
Why you use y'all?
You all with y'all. That's
Okay, yeah, you could.
I'll
do-
write that.
Yeah.
With y'all. Just kidding.
Yeah, with y'all. It's not Southern dialect. Okay, well, we've got more time. Would you like to go on beyond this?
Yes, you're now
Sure.
past what I had prepared, but I will just
Oh.
listen.
No, we don't
Okay.
have to.
No, it's okay. I think we need to push forward.
Okay.
I don't
You
think
okay with
it'll
that, Drew?
cripple me.
Yep, I'm good with that.
Okay. Be able to identify every relative pronoun, explain its case, number, and gender, and explain what word the relative clause modifies. In other words, its antecedent, and what function it performs in the sentence. Okay, I neglected to read that sentence there, and so I will stumble through it. But remata, are you familiar with that word, rema?
That's also words, but not
Yes,
right.
it's
Yeah.
it's got a slightly different meaning than logos.
Okay. Yeah, I think you talked about that last
yeah.
week, and to be honest, I don't remember. Very
Well, what I think I remember, and I'm going by memory now, logos is the conceptual idea of word. In other words, the meaning of the word, whereas rhema is more the sound of the word. That's one way to think of it. Another way to think of it is rhema is often used to and translated as a saying
Okay.
or a. Well, let's look in Mounce's lexicon in the back under rhema.
So, quick question. There's a rough breathing over a row.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure I've seen that before.
Well, he may have mentioned that at the beginning of the book.
Okay.
But yes, it sounds like an RH.
Rhema.
It's very faint.
Okay.
But, yeah, if row is at the beginning of the word, it has a rough breathing.
Cool. Okay.
He gives Mounts gives his definition of rhema on page 499, top right hand.
Okay. Rhema. A word or a saying. Yeah. I think I've seen it. There's a verse that talks about the oracle of God.
Yeah.
That would be a rhema, I believe.
And it emphasizes the fact that it's actually spoken, right? Because an
Yeah.
oracle is something a prophet says.
Yeah, that's right. It's
Okay. Whereas logos is maybe more abstract.
Yeah, it is more abstract. The root meaning of logos is an orderly arrangement of things.
Oh, like logic.
Logic, yeah. And, you know, we've got a lot of words that have a suffix, biology, anthropology. The
Yes.
Logy is from the Greek logia, which is the same root as logos, but it's the science of, or the orderly arrangement of certain things.
Right.
The ancient Greeks like to think of the universe as being an orderly thing, and has well, no, just a minute. I think I can remember. Give me just a second. Well, no, I'm sorry. I thought I remembered it. Does that give you any ideas about it? Okay, rhema. There are sometimes too, you know, about that rough breathing on the row. There's a few words that have a double row, and the first row has the rough breathing, and the second row has nothing. I think parrhesia is one of those words.
Isn't Rhema the name of one of the characters in The Chosen? I'm sorry. I think they actually is.
Could be.
I wonder if they picked that for a reason. Weird.
Okay. Ta rhemata ha, there's our relative pronoun. Ego lalika, who mean. I think that's the end of the relative clause. Pneuma estin, kai zoe estin. So the words which I myself have spoken. So yeah, I said I myself because I've got the ego in addition to the implied I in the verb, which I myself have spoken to you.
Yeah, okay, David.
Spirit it is, and life it is. Now this is another case of that neuter plural subject that the Greeks like to think of a collection of items as a unit. So the words collectively is spirit.
Estin.
Yeah, but we would say the words are spirit and are life.
Okay, I can see that. So a more smoothed out translation might be the words which I have spoken or that I have spoken to you.
Our spirit
and our life.
Yeah. Now I'd like to stop for a minute on this first because this is a significant thing, this statement. And I'd like to just brainstorm a little bit on it. Why does Jesus use rhemata there instead of logoi? Hoi logoi.
So actually, what might help. So
I have a thought. What do you have though, Drew?
I was just gonna ask real quick if Rhema, one of the translations right options is sayings.
Yeah.
And at least in English, that is, we also use that to describe something that someone would habitually say, the kind of statement that represents the sort of thing that someone would say. And I think Jesus has some of those, right? Like your light, you don't put a light under a basket or a bushel or right, whatever. He actually says that a couple times in Luke alone.
That's a typical statement of Jesus.
Right. We could say it's one of his sayings. Would Rhema have that kind of connotation?
I think so.
Okay.
There's a verse I'm thinking of, which it doesn't appear in any of the gospel narratives, but Paul, I think, is the one who, and maybe it's Peter, but where he says, remember the words of the Lord, it is more blessed to give than to receive.
Yeah.
Well, you'll search in vain for where Jesus said that, but apparently that's something he said commonly. But so that might be a reason for using rhema instead of logos. But another reason, in Ephesians 6, it lists the weapons. Remember how's it put?
The armor of
the armor of God. Yeah, you have the shield of faith, the breastplate of righteousness, the feet shod with preparation of gospel, the helmet of salvation. But then you have the word of the Spirit. What Greek word do you think is used there? Logos or rhema?
Well, I would have said logos until this conversation.
Yeah, right. That would have been my guess.
Let me see. Let me just double check to make sure. It is rhema. The sword of the Spirit,
which is the word
Makairon, the sword of the Spirit, which is the rhema theou. Now,
Oh,
I read this somewhere, and I hope I can
as if
repeat
we
it.
ought to say that. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm about to exit.
The person I read this from was saying, when you're in a spiritual battle, don't take the logos, which would be comparable to the whole armory. Take a specific weapon, a specific sword for the occasion.
Hmm.
In other words, when Jesus was being tempted by the devil in the wilderness, the devil attacked him in 3 different ways, and Jesus took a rhema from the armory
Yeah.
to defeat him. And if that's the correct understanding, and I think it is, I think it's a legitimate thing. When we're under attack from the enemy, use the appropriate portion from the armory, the appropriate weapon for the situation.
Mm-hmm.
It makes perfect sense to me. And I can give you an example. What's something that happened just recently? I was aware, I think 3 weeks ago, I was going to share this with the whole group when we could all be together, but I think I'll share a portion of it right now.
Mm-hmm.
I was aware that I was being under attack by the enemy, because we know from Ephesians 6, it says, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against spiritual wickedness in high places. So I know that Satan does attack us. It says in 1 Peter, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks around seeking someone to devour, whom resist, steadfast in the faith. So I knew that I needed to resist this. I was aware that I was being attacked. And the way it was happening, it's a little embarrassing to me, but I was feeling sorry for myself. I was feeling like I wasn't being appreciated. I was being neglected or something like that. And it's pitiful. But the more I got wrapped up in the thoughts about a specific thing, the more my emotions got the control of me. And I knew knew where that was leading. So I took a sword, a rhema out of the armory. Hebrews chapter 6 says, looking diligently, lest any man fail of the grace of God, lest any root of bitterness springing up trouble you, and thereby many be defiled.
Mm-hmm.
Well, a root of bitterness, the word root attached to bitterness seems to suggest that it can be pulled out and gotten rid of before it gets big and spreads and affects other people.
Right.
And I know how that has happened before in my life. I have lashed out verbally to people and said things that were hurtful, usually to somebody I love. I didn't want it to get to that. And I remembered a time years before when I did that.
Mm-hmm.
So I was praying for the Lord to help me using this rhema from the arsenal to get truth into my mind and heart.
What's the address of that again?
That's Hebrews 6, 12, I think.
Which is a reference
Maybe it's
back to like Numbers. It's an Old Testament reference to.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, Hebrews
just a minute,
6 though.
I'm going to have to look this up in concordance. root of bitterness. Bitterness is a good word. Oh, Hebrews 12:15, that's it. I think this is talking about Esau also.
Ah, okay.
Just about there. Okay. Looking carefully, lest anyone fall short of the grace of God, lest any root of bitterness springing up cause trouble, and by this many become defiled. And then it goes on to talk about Esau. Lest there be any fornicator or profane person like Esau, who for one morsel of food sold his birthright. Well, anyway, so I was struggling with my downward spiraling emotions.
Yeah.
And maybe you've had situations like that
Certainly.
too. And the way the Lord answered that prayer was in this very room on Tuesday, 2.5 weeks ago. Maybe it was 3.5, I'm not sure, but recently. As I was coming to the Bible study, I didn't feel like going, for one thing. And when I got there, I knew Charlie was going to ask me to lead the singing, and I didn't feel like singing.
Did we do the Keith and Christine Getty one that week, or
no?
I'm sure
The
it's
one he picked was "Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing."
Oh
Remember
yeah,
that?
I sat
And
next
you
to
were
you.
sitting
Yeah.
right next to me. Well, you may not have realized it, Zach, but the Lord used you to help me.
Oh, praise God.
First of all, you got a beautiful voice.
Thank you.
And the words to that
The
song.
Lord's glory.
Yeah. Well, the words to that song were just tremendous, especially the third verse.
Yes.
Ode to grace, how great a debtor daily I'm constrained to be. Let thy goodness like a fetter bind my wandering heart to thee.
Amen.
Well, that's me. I mean, my heart was wandering all over the place, places where it shouldn't go.
Yeah.
Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it. Boy, did I feel it.
Yeah.
Prone to leave the God I love. Here's my heart, Lord. Take and seal it. Don't let it float all around in these dangerous waters.
Yeah.
Seal it for thy courts above. So that was the first step. And then during the discussion afterward, with so many scriptures and so many brothers bringing thoughts to the group to amplify the scriptures that we were looking at. Have you ever noticed how God uses the whole body to minister to the body through the word?
Yeah.
Well, that was happening.
That's awesome.
And then to top it all off, right after the study, Stephen Yu was sitting at the table next to you. And he and I talked a little bit. And I was sharing a few things with him, what I was struggling with. And he mentioned some things from his experience. And by the time I left that study, I was rejoicing.
That's so good. Awesome.
Well, on my way over, I was thinking, Carl, this is stupid what you're going through. You're considering some minor little thing to be so important. Look at what Jesus had to go through. I mean, he was, he told his disciples, you're all going to fall away this night. Judas was going to betray him. Jesus knew that. He said, one of you who's dipping in the bowl with me is going to betray me. Peter, you're going to deny me 3 times. And then they all fell away.
Yeah.
And even his own father had turned his back on him. And Jesus knew ahead of time what was going to happen. He fought that battle in the Garden of Gethsemane. So all of these things combined, the scripture, the singing, the word, all of those came together at my point of need and helped me to get past that. And actually, I was rejoicing that I was able to experience just a minor amount of suffering, because one of the things that Christians do is we share in the sufferings of Christ. And I know how I felt when I was feeling that way, but I know now that, well, ever since then, I've been rejoicing about that. And I want to share, I've just about shared most of what I was planning to share with the whole group, but let me share this scripture with you. That what this was my daily reading in the Psalms of that morning when these things were happening. Psalm 103, bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me, bless his holy name. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits, who forgiveth all thine iniquities, who healeth all thy diseases, who redeemeth thy life from destruction, who crowneth thee with loving kindness and tender mercies, who satisfieth thy mouth with good things, so that thy youth is renewed like the eagles. Those 5 verses there. The pronoun thy or thine refers back to its antecedent in verse 2, which is soul. Thy soul's diseases, thy soul's iniquities. It's not physical diseases that's being mentioned here, but soul diseases like anger, hatred, jealousy, lust, any of those things. Those are soul diseases. And it says the Lord can heal those soul diseases. And that's exactly what did happen. This was a soul disease I was having, and it was a spiritual battle. I knew what was going on, but I seemed powerless until the Lord answered the prayer through you guys. And so one other psalm that blessed me, in that Psalm 66:16, come and hear, all ye that fear God, and I will declare what he hath done for my soul. So I'm declaring to you guys what the Lord did for my soul. And he's interested in us being victorious over these kind of things.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, I couldn't do it in my own strength. I was trying. I was trying to push away those negative thoughts, but I couldn't do it. It seemed like the harder I pushed, the worse it got.
Right.
Until the Lord brought deliverance through my prayer. I was just crying out and didn't know how he was going to do it, but this is how he did it.
That's awesome.
Well, it made a big impact on me, and I've told several people about it since. And I don't know, we've probably taken enough time.
It's such a wonder to see the Lord at work.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Thank you for making of that an Ebenezer to bring it back to the hymn.
Yeah, here I raise mine Ebenezer.
Yeah.
Hereby thy help I have come.
Right.
You know what Ebenezer means?
You looked it up that morning.
It's thus far has the Lord helped us.
Right.
He's helped us to this point.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if he has, what about the future? Won't he help us again?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So we have experience. All these experiences strengthen our faith, and it helps us for future trials.
Right.
I was impressed by a book that I read about the life of Abraham. There were, I believe, 10 different testings that Abraham had to go through that are recorded. Some of the earlier ones were, he didn't do so well. He did well when the first time when the Lord told him to get up out of Ur and leave and go to a place where he'd tell him.
Right.
He did that. He didn't do so well when he took his father and his nephew along, and they caused him to delay and not really get where he's going until his father died.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but then when the famine hit and he went down to Egypt and told his wife to say she was his sister
Right.
instead of wife, that didn't turn out so well. And later he did it again. He failed those tests, but God wasn't through with him. Each succeeding test seemed to be stronger, and he would succeed at some of those testings until the last recorded one was where he told him to sacrifice his only son, Isaac.
Yeah.
It's interesting he called him his only son. He had Ishmael, but Isaac was the only one God recognized. And Abraham passed that test with flying colors.
Yeah.
Because the Lord, he said, will provide for himself a lamb. In Romans, I think, is where it talks, or maybe it's Hebrews, talks about he considered that God would raise him back from the dead if he had to kill him. So, and after that, there are no more recorded tests of Abraham. Maybe there were that weren't recorded, but it seems like God matches the testing that we have to go through to our maturity level.
Yeah.
And he knows just how much pressure to apply. And he wants to teach us through every one of those experiences that we, especially when we succeed, it strengthens us looking at the past for any of the future testings.
Yeah.
So,
Gives us hope because he is, it says that he intends for our sanctification through that process in Thessalonians, right?
Yeah.
And it's not in his nature to fail in the things which he sets out to do, right? So,
and that's why the same word for test and tempt is the same word in Greek, peirazo. The devil intends for us to fail, but God intends the same test, peirazo, for us to succeed.
I think there's something there that has to be a little bit divided out in terms of, because it is part of the Lord's prayer that we be led not into temptation.
Yeah.
And we're told also to flee from temptation.
Yeah.
And so there is some kind of temptation. We're not supposed to put ourselves in that situation.
Exactly.
To do so is arrogant and not what he's told us. We should recognize that we're weak and stay away from it. That's part of our obedience.
Proverbs has some good things to say about that. I remember one verse, I don't know if I can quote it exactly, but the fool doesn't foresee the evil and hide himself.
And goes right into
calamity
or something like that. Yeah.
But a prudent man foresees it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I usually also kind of, I guess, maybe attach to that the injunction from Jesus to be watchful and pray.
Oh yeah, watch and pray.
He says in the garden. And I mean, yeah, I think there is something there where it's like so the tests that God gives for us to refine our faith, right? As part of our sanctification, they may include, I guess, the tempter, Satan, but we're not supposed to just say, I can handle this and go get tempted. That's a foolish thing to do. You know what I'm saying? So
Yes. And I think we see an example of that in Jesus' interaction with Peter, both before and after the crucifixion. Peter said, though all the rest deny you,
Right.
I never will. And Jesus then said, well, before the rooster crows, you'll deny me 3 times. But he protested again, even if I have to die with you, I won't deny you. Well, then, right after that, they go to the Garden of Gethsemane. And just like he said, Jesus said, stay here, watch and pray, lest you enter into temptation. Spirit's willing, but the flesh is weak.
Right.
But instead of praying, they went to sleep. And Jesus went 3 times to pray and found him asleep again. So Peter didn't do what the Lord said. But Jesus, prior to that, had said to Peter, Satan has demanded permission to sift you as wheat, but I prayed for you that your faith will not fail. And when you're restored, promise for restoration, strengthen your brothers. And sure enough, Peter did deny the Lord, as he said he would never do. And then the Lord, after the resurrection, took Peter aside and asked him 3 times, do you love me? And those were 3 affirmations of Peter's love for the Lord to offset his 3 denials, which was done in front of the rest of the disciples. So Jesus restored him publicly in front of the rest of the disciples.
Right.
And there's one little thing in the first question that Jesus asked, Peter, do you love me? He said, more than these.
Right.
Well, what did that mean? Do you love me more than these other disciples love me? Or do you love me more than you love this fishing business? Or do you love me? I think there's 3 ways it could be understood. And the Greek construction leaves it ambiguous, so it could be any one of the 3. But I believe, and I can't be dogmatic about it, but I believe that what Jesus meant and what Peter probably understood that he meant, Peter had said, even if all the others deny you,
Right.
I will not. Peter was claiming to know that he loved Jesus more than all the other disciples. He couldn't know that. We can't know people's motives or hearts.
Right.
But he claimed that he could. So Jesus was asking, do you love me more than these others love me? And Peter was humbled by that time. Lord, you know everything. You know my heart. I do love you.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. I mean, and that would have really addressed his issue of pride.
Yeah.
To prepare him for his role in the church.
Yeah. He had to be broken. That's where he was broken. And a broken and contrite heart, the Lord will not despise.
Yeah.
Well, we've taken up our time. Would one of you like to close in prayer?
Did you want to stop the recording first, or?
Oh, yeah, you can do that.
As soon as I remember how to do that.